Hello, good afternoon, or well, good afternoon to the people in Europe and in Africa. Good morning to this one in America, and good evening for this one in Asia. Welcome everybody to this webinar organized by UN Habitat and hosted at the ICLEI Daring City virtual forum. This webinar, Solid Waste Management, the Forgotten Underestimated Child and its Critical Role for Current and Future Crises, will look and will discuss the critical role of municipal solid waste management to reach the climate goal and the Paris Agreement, how to decrease our greenhouse gases emission, and how we can move towards a circular economy. Moreover, the webinar will also explore the role of partnership and how partnerships can harness opportunities to respond to climate emergency in an effective way, especially in the context of pandemics such as COVID-19, and also how partnership can maintain or even expand municipal solid waste management service delivery, again in the context of crisis too, and also how partnership supports to our efforts in Build Back Better for climate resilience. So once again, welcome everyone. I'm gonna be your moderator. My name is Francesca Calisesi, and I work at the Urban Basic Services of UN Habitat. I would like, before taking you to the agenda, actually, no, let me go briefly through the agenda. So we are gonna have a keynote speech from the chief of the Urban Basic Services of UN Habitat, Andre Zikus. Then I will briefly introduce our panelists, and we will have the interventions from our speakers. So the first intervention will look at the municipal solid waste management strategies for mitigating emissions and build back better for climate resilience. The second, we look at delivering effective municipal solid waste management services in a crisis context. Then we will look at the COVID-19 response and preparedness and the ability of cities to adapt and continue the delivery of the municipal solid waste management services. And finally, we will look at the role of partnerships, especially in the context of the Waste Cities Challenge in Africa. And finally, we will have a Q&A session before the opening remarks. So now I would like to hand over to Mr. Andre Zikus for his keynote speech. Andre, you're welcome.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Francesca, and thanks very much, colleagues, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be here today. As Francesca mentioned, my name is Andre Zikus. I'm the Chief of Urban Basic Services at UN Habitat, and I've been with Habitat for the last nearly 30 years, dealing in various capacities with our work on basic services. And I'd also very much like to thank ICLEI and the city of Bonn for organizing the Daring Cities conference, which is virtual this time in 2020, and inviting UN Habitat to contribute to this important and very timely virtual global forum on climate change and urban leaders. In 2007, the world really crossed a very significant threshold where 50% of the world's population is now living in urban areas. Since then, urbanization has continued at a very rapid pace in Africa and in Asia. And by 2050, it's estimated that 70% of the world's population is projected to live in urban areas. And so urbanization is really one of these mega trends which are going to define how we live. And if we look at Africa today, we can actually see and project for the future that the majority of the cities which we're going to see in the year 2050 have actually not been built today. So as these cities are being built, we have a great opportunity to actually influence these cities to make them more sustainable. Urbanization is an engine of economic growth and social development. However, the challenge is really to ensure that it is sustainable and benefits all. Nothing in the recent past really highlights this challenge as the current pandemic which we're experiencing, which has really exposed the weaknesses and inequities in our societies. Proximity between people, the defining characteristic of urbanization, can put us at greater risk of infection. We must learn from the current crisis and plan ahead to build back better. While often overlooked in debates about how to reach climate goals, better solid waste management can make a huge contribution to the Paris goals. Currently, 33% of the global waste generated is disposed in open dump sites in sanitary systems, contributing to 5% of the global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. According to a recent study conducted by the International Solid Waste Management Association, under the business as usual scenario, open dump sites will account for nearly 8 to 10% of emissions by the year 2025. With 2 billion people lacking access to solid waste collection and 3 billion people without access to controlled solid waste disposal facilities and 800 million tons of plastic waste yearly entering our oceans, on the top of 150 million metric tons that are currently circulating in our marine environments, sustainable municipal solid waste management must be one of the key dimensions for urban management and our urban planning strategies. In fact, if municipal solid waste management is properly managed and the first steps are taken towards a circular economy, the sector can hugely help mitigate emissions from cities. Better solid waste management is also important in light of the current COVID-19 crisis. While the world focuses on washing hands, solid waste collection and treatment needs to continue in a safe way to avoid the spread of other diseases, ensure proper disposal of increased amounts of medical waste and potentially infectious waste from the municipal solid waste stream. We must also take note that management of municipal solid waste generates business and livelihood opportunities, especially for the urban poor, who often survive on daily incomes from buying and selling recyclables. The urban poor are often the category most affected by badly managed solid waste management. They often live at the edge of dump sites or in informal settlements deprived of most urban basic services such as water, sanitation, waste collection, and public transport, and are often exposed to diseases and other health risks. Better municipal solid waste management has the potential to bring positive changes from both the social and environmental points of view of creating green jobs, particularly for the urban poor, and promoting a transition to a prosperous circular economy, thus mitigating greenhouse gas emissions by making our cities more livable for residents and attractive to tourists and investors. Indeed, sustainable solid waste management plays a critical role in adapting and building resilient cities. Particularly the growing cities in the world can make a great contribution to the implementation of the new urban agenda and achieving SDG 11 on making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We should also be reminded that there is also an SDG 11 related to solid waste management. While the role of scientists, engineers, and planners is essential for designing products to be reused and repurposed to move towards a more circular or cradle-to-cradle economy and develop technologies for resource recovery in the most efficient way, policymakers and city officials play a key role in the uptake of such solutions and technologies. It is with this objective that UN Habitat has been collaborating for several years and with several actors, including ICLEI, featuring joint programs and events at the World Urban Forum held in Medellin in 2014, in Kuala Lumpur in 2018, and earlier this year in Abu Dhabi. We're also jointly implementing with ICLEI the Urban LEDS project, a project funded by the European Commission supporting 8 model cities in defining low carbon emissions and development strategies, compiling community scale greenhouse gas emissions, inventories, and defining a low emissions for the development trajectory. We are committed to take forward this collaboration through activities such as supporting the exchange of experience between cities on best practices on municipal solid waste management. I refer in this connection to our recent initiative of the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge, which features a collaboration between a pair of mentors and mentee cities on good municipal waste management. Currently, 24 cities are involved in such a twinning initiative. The city of Bonn is also part of this program and is partnering with the city of Cape Coast in establishing the Foundation for Sustainable Municipal Waste Management. We're happy to see that there are representatives from both of these cities to share their experience during this webinar. Promoting networks and partnerships is a key pillar of UN Habitat's work, as we firmly believe that greater achievements can be reached if we join forces and are inclusive in defining and implementing strategies, so to leave no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may know, in September 2019, and months before the world was confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic, the UN Secretary General issued a call for a decade of action at 3 levels: global action to secure greater leadership, more resources and smarter solutions for the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, local action to take forward the change needed in policies, budget, institutions, and regulatory frameworks of governments, cities, and local authorities, and people action, including by youth, civil society, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders, to generate an unstoppable movement to push forward the necessary transformations. The current pandemic has really highlighted the urgency of this call of the Secretary General. UN Habitat's current strategic plan responds to this call by its focus on 4 interrelated domains of change. The first is on reducing spatial inequality and poverty in communities across the urban-rural continuum, enhance shared prosperity of cities and regions, strengthen climate action, improved urban environment, and lastly, effective urban crisis prevention and response. I would like to reiterate UN Habitat's commitment to work with ICLE and other partners that are working with us today here, such as the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Japan International Cooperation Agency in the context of the African Clean Cities Platform, and the cities of Bonn and Cape Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I come to the end of my speech, and I thank you very much for your attention. I very much look forward to listening to you and learning from you on how you're managing and improving the solid waste management in our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre, for your intervention and your inspiring words. So now I would like to introduce our speakers for today's session. So the first speaker will be Kruti Monot. She's a project manager at COMSA, the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa, from GIZ. She's working with COMSA. She's working with local governments in the Sub-Saharan region on the development of climate relevant projects, planning, and cities partnerships. And she has a master's degree from the London School of Economics. Then we have Shomura-san, who is Deputy Director of the Environmental Management Group, Global Environment Department from Japan International Cooperation Agency. He's, as we said, is the Deputy Director, and he works with several international organizations and governments to find solution and apply solution on for waste management and environmental issues. And he has over 17 years of experience within the government sector and working for the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. Then we will have an intervention from Antonis Vropoulos. He's the CEO of D-Waste and the former president of ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association. Is also, beside being the president of D-Waste, is also the founder and is a member of the International Advisory Board of UNEP's International Environmental Technology Center. He's been involved in solid waste management projects for over 25 years and in 26 countries, and he has completed over more than 200 projects. He has an extensive experience working with the public sector, from prime ministers to municipal officers, and from the parliaments to waste management authorities. Last but not least, he believes in scientific activism, and is a human rights advocate and a jazz lover. Then we have Verena Schwarte. She's an officer for the International Affairs and Global Sustainability at the Federal City of Bonn. And among other activity, she's the coordinator of the partnerships that the city of Bonn has with Cape Coast and La Paz. And also she managed other international cooperation projects. Before holding this position, she's been working for more than 10 years with several NGOs in Germany, but also in West and Central Africa. And then we have Emmanuel Ikpe Kwaku, who is the Chief Development Planner and the head of Cape Coast Metropolitan Planning Unit in Ghana. And he has more than 20 years of experience working as a development planner with 6 different local government authorities in Ghana. He's currently the focal person for international relations in charge of sister cities cooperation for the city of Cape Coast. He's also a member of Ghana Institute of Planners and associate member of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. And I also add that Verena and Emmanuel are our focal points for the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge, where the city of Bonn and the city of Cape Coast are involved. So there was an overview, and now I would give the word to Kruti, so she can start our presentation. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Francesca, and also thank you everyone for joining on, well, here it's Friday evening, and of course, probably later if you're in Asia. Could you tell me if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can, Kruti.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'm Kruti. I work at the GIZ supporting the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa project, and I will speak a bit about our lessons learned on solid waste management working with the cities and local governments that we work with. Just to start with maybe a bit of background on what the Covenant of Mayors or COMSA is. So the COMSA is an initiative of cities and local governments, subnational governments who commit to taking climate and energy action. It is a part of a global network called the Global Covenant of Mayors, which has over 9,000 signatories worldwide. But in Sub-Saharan Africa, there's about 230 local administrations from 35 countries who joined the initiative and are working on different climate and energy plans and projects. As GI said, along with a few other implementing partners and agencies, we work in depth with some cities on developing climate action plans, but also more focused also on developing projects that address climate change and energy access. So that's just a bit of context on where we are coming from. And now that given we are a climate and energy focused network of cities, why are we interested in waste? Well, that's because waste management has been a priority for more or less every city that we have spoken to so far in sub-Saharan Africa. It's, of course, an essential service and a mandate for local governments to implement effective solid waste management. Almost half, or probably more than half, of the project proposals that we receive from our partner local governments have been on some sort of solid waste management. And in some cities, it can actually take up to half of the operational budget of the local governments, depending on the city context. So we know that this is really high up on the local government's agenda. But at the same time, we also see that developing effective investment-ready solid waste management projects is still a challenge for many local governments and cities in the region. And there are different reasons, and I won't really go into a lot of detail, but we often receive projects, for example, which don't have clear roles of what the local government is supposed to do in the project, or there's a technology which is not really backed by appropriate waste audits. So you can say, maybe you have a majority of organic waste, but the technology that is proposed does not support treatment of organic waste. And so such steps are missing to identify the right business models, technologies, and of course the biggest constraint is budgets and lack of appropriate funding sources. So with this context, we also realize that given it's high up on local government's priority, given it's still a challenge, if solid waste management is actually positioned well, it can have a lot more benefits. And that's what, of course, this whole panel discussion is about. And so I will just go a bit more into potential benefits of good solid waste management. And besides the more obvious development and economic benefits for local governments, which is around improved public health and sanitation, creating jobs in the whole value chain. So if you're moving from just landfilling or dumping the waste or burning the waste, rather creating a value chain, you're creating jobs. And I think the following panelists will talk a lot more to this. But besides these more obvious ones, there's also a lot of climate and environment benefits to solid waste management. And these come from, firstly, diverting waste that goes into landfills. And we actually know that, as the previous speaker mentioned, it's almost 5% of global emissions. But at the city level, it can vary from 5% all the way to 30% in some cities. The emissions from waste dumping or waste burning. So if you're avoiding that, you're avoiding GHG emissions. You're reducing air pollution, soil and water contamination. And also at the same time, sometimes if you're having, say, an anaerobic digestion and so on, you can have biogas and electricity, which can replace dirtier fuels. So there are, of course, a lot of opportunities to capture climate and environment related benefits from solid waste management. And what that also means that if they're packaged well, and if these benefits are linked properly, they can also open up doors to climate finance, which again is a really hot topic these days. And a lot of investors and public and private sources of finance want to invest in projects around climate change. So solid waste management holds a real opportunity for local governments to access some of these funds through climate financiers. So in our project, in the Covenant of Mayors, we actually, to operationalize this opportunity, we have recently also just launched a study, which is called Finance Roadmaps for Climate Projects, which breaks down step by step the different steps that local governments, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, can take to access this climate finance. And we break it down in different project types, but it also includes integrated solid waste management and waste to energy. With the objective, the key objective is to really explain the role that a local government can play, starting from the project conception or inception phase all the way to implementation, development, and to finding the right funding for the project. so we're very excited to have just released this study, and we hope that some of you may be interested in reading a bit further on it. And just as an example, so from the integrated waste management roadmap to access finance, just a few example steps that local governments can take. And of course, it always starts with developing the budget needs and developing the needs of for waste management. So by starting to analyze what budgets we have, do we have any tariffs, do we have any user fees on solid waste management, what are the current existing spends. At the same time, it's also really essential to undertake a study or an audit, which tells you a bit on what kind of waste the city is generating, where it is going, what is the chain like. And that then, of course, gives you a basis to identify the right options, to identify the right business models, and then look at what possibility do we have to engage funders. And the study goes a lot more in depth in this. I wouldn't spend too much time, but we're hoping that we can use this as a basis to also work with local governments and partners of local governments to develop solid waste management projects that can effectively be financed and implemented through climate finance. And in the spirit of also lessons learned and sharing partnerships, and partnerships with cities, we also try to engage and highlight some best practices, one of which that I really like is South Africa, where they managed to access climate finance through the Green Climate Fund for a waste management of waste diversion program, where basically 30 municipalities across South Africa teamed up to apply to the GCF and actually managed to get this funding. I think they got about $1 million for preparing the project, and then upwards of 50 million to actually implement this project USD. So that to see these success stories, I think, can also be very inspiring for local governments and partners of local governments who work on such projects. And there's another similar partnership approach that was taken in East Africa with a number of regional governments around Lake Victoria, who then started off with a pilot, I think, in 6 or 7 cities, and then scaled it up to about 15 to 20 cities around Lake Victoria on effective waste management, which managed to attract funding from a number of donors, including the EIB, including AFD, including AFDB. So it's not impossible. And I mean, I think the message that we are trying to give here is that local governments can really tackle climate goals through waste management, but we have to be quite smart about linking and packaging these waste management projects to really highlight their climate benefits, to highlight their job creation, their employment benefits, because if that is done smartly, then it can open up partnerships, it can open up different doors to climate finance. And of course, it's not easy. And of course, it's very important to lay the right groundwork, to identify what roles the local government can play, what roles the different partners can play in the whole process to really unlock the benefits and the possible opportunities that that solid waste management holds at the city level. And yeah, as ComSci, we continue to work with our cities and with our partners on such projects and on such partnerships. And we hope to use this as a basis to advise the different projects that we work with. With that, I will close and leave you with some contact information if you would like to know more. And I really look forward to listening from the other presenters as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kruti, for your presentation. So now I would like to give the word to Shomiura-san. You're welcome.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. In spite of this Good Friday night, this in Japan it's night, but I think it's afternoon time in Europe and several timing in the world. And as I mentioned, in Japan now it's over midnight, so if I fall asleep during my presentation, please wake me up. And I'm Shomiura from Japan International Cooperation Agency. I'm a deputy director in JICA, and we conducted a survey on the impact of COVID-19 on waste management in Africa. And I would like to quickly show the quick overview of the survey today. This is the outline of my presentation today. Firstly, I will introduce about JICA, my organization, and ACCP. ACCP stands for African Clean Cities Platform. ACCP proceeded the survey, and I will explain about the ACCP too. And secondly, I will explain outline and results of the survey. And lastly, I'll show the key findings of the survey. Let me turn to the first topic, introduction of JICA and the ACCP. JICA is an executing agency of Japanese ODA that covers around 150 countries. JICA in charge of bilateral assistance from Japan to developing countries. We utilize technical cooperation, finance and investment cooperation, and grants mainly. And this is the African Clean Cities Platform, ACCP. ACCP is a platform to support African cities and countries to solve their own problems of waste management. Ministry of the Environment, Government of Japan, JICA, Yokohama City, UN Environment, and UN Habitat. These 5 organizations are managing this platform. And our vision is, as you can see, to provide an open platform to support African countries and cities to find their own measures and solutions for appropriate waste management towards the achievement of SDGs. And we are sharing knowledge and networking or promoting of investment in waste management field, and also supporting to achieve the SDGs targets. In ACCP, in ACCP, now 37 countries and 65 cities already joined, and these yellow countries are member countries and cities. And now let me turn to the second topic, outline and results of the survey. The survey was conducted by ACCP, African Clean Cities Platform. And I will explain about the main results, main topics, main points of the survey. Outline of the survey is this. Objectives was to understand the impact of COVID-19 in the field of waste management in Africa. We didn't know about the influence of COVID-19 in Africa, so we decided to conduct this survey to quickly understand the situation of waste and waste management in Africa. Target was members of African Clean Cities Platform, as I explained. And the respondents, 24 members responded to the survey. These were national and local governments. Period was June 1st to 19th in this year. Method was web questionnaire and email. And I explained the main points of the results of the survey. We asked about the waste situation and waste management situation of African countries. Have the types and the composition of waste collected changed during the COVID-19 pandemic? This is a waste composition and types situation. And more than 62% countries and cities said yes. So a majority said it's changed, types and compositions are changed. And also we asked, have the waste amount collected and the collection frequency changed during the COVID-19 pandemic? And in the amount, about the amount, 30%, around 30% said increased, and around 30% said decreased. This is interesting result. But the interesting thing is that we asked the reason of this change, and they said that both of them said that lockdown of cities is the reason of increasing and decreasing too. Some people said that because of the decrease of industrial activities, the garbage waste was decreased. And some people said that people tend to stay at home during the lockdown. So the waste from home increased, something like that. So in the same situation, people feel differently. So different results came up. And changes of collection frequency, this can show that this shows same tendency as amount shows. This is the next slide, and this shows that governments do not have enough resources, especially for protecting waste speakers from COVID-19. Upside question is about waste management in general, and downside are the questionnaires about waste speakers. About waste management in general, have you confirmed any cases or cases of COVID-19 among waste management workers? And they all know that whether waste management workers are infected or not, they recognize the workers' situation. And also, does your city have enough resources to respond to the challenges caused by COVID-19? And 75% majority said that they don't have enough resources to respond. And on the other hand, the questionnaire, the result of the reply of questionnaire about waste speakers. This is the same question as this one. Were there any confirmed cases of COVID-19 among the waste speakers? And more than 62% countries and cities said that we don't know. So they don't have resources to check whether waste speakers are living in the city infected or not. They are not affordable to do it. The priority is, we guess, lower than the other programs. So they don't know this one. And also asked, do you think your city has enough resources for the prevention measures for waste speakers? So this is the same question as this one, and the proportion is higher than this one. So we can guess that the waste speakers program is lower priority than other programs. So this slide show that governments do not have the capacity to dispose the increasing amounts of infectious waste. We asked that, do you think your city has enough resources for any of the measures? These measures means resources to properly and safely dispose increasing infectious waste. So the point is green part. Green part is no, we do not have enough resources to do any of the properly and safely disposed way. So 50% countries and cities don't have enough resources to dispose properly, dispose the infectious waste properly. And this slide show that the implementation of safer method of waste management is needed. We asked that, do the waste collectors have human-to-human contact with the waste generators during collection? And the green part and yellow part is the point. These are the yes before and during COVID-19, yellow. Yes before COVID-19, but now reduced, green. So more than half of the countries and the cities still in the countries and cities, waste collectors still have human-to-human contact with the waste generators. So COVID-19 is basically transmitting from person to person. So if the waste worker, a waste collector, has infected, he or she can be a spreader of COVID-19. So this is a really dangerous way to collect waste in this situation, we guess. And we asked about the needs for support against COVID-19 too. These fields are the ones they stated. They stated that support is needed. Capacity building and sanitary and protective equipment, raising the awareness of residents, installation of treatment facilities and equipment for medical and infectious waste disposal and waste management technologies, and development of waste management plan. So these many needs are needed in the African countries and cities. So let me turn to the last topic, key findings. So these are the key findings of the survey. Firstly, prompt response. We could see the prompt response. African countries have taken measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 in the waste management field, but insufficient resources. Supports are needed in both tangible and intangible. Protection equipment, proper treatment facilities, or development of plans, guidelines, and management capacity, all are needed for African cities and countries in this situation. And unclear prospects, and it is a chance for change. Situations are still uncertain, so further data collection and analysis are needed. This is a just quick survey. Only we asked the question and their reply. We just analyzed their reply. So we need to check the fact too, and we have to collect a lot of information to support them. At the same time, such unprecedented environment can be a trigger for behavior change and making innovation. So this situation can be a chance to change and making innovation. So need for collaboration. JICA or ACCP can do only the limited things. So international communities and African countries should gather together, should gather their knowledge, experiences, and lessons and integrate them into effective measures against COVID-19. Yeah, we need to cooperate each other in this situation. So this is my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shomura, for your intervention. Before giving the word to Antonis, I'm asking participants if you have any questions, you can write it in the Q&A box. Also, if you are addressing a specific speaker, you can also write the name. And all the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So now, Mr. Antonis, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So I'm going to speak about COVID-19 response and preparedness for municipal solid waste services and about the efforts we did to deliver and adapt to the new conditions. However, I would like to start by putting a broader context, which is very important in order to realize the exact evolution of waste management services around the world. So if we put the straightforward question, is our response to COVID-19 crisis good? Obviously, the answer is not good. It's not good enough. And this is true not only for COVID-19, it's true also for municipal solid waste services. Despite the efforts and the heroic work that is done by millions of waste workers all around the world in the formal and informal sector, what is true is that in the countries where waste management system exists, they are becoming a little bit weakened. And in the countries where waste management systems do not exist or they are very poor, things are becoming worse. And this is not a surprise for none of us, because as we recently realized in our Global Waste Management Outlook 2 research between UNEP and the International Solid Waste Association, right now the situation worldwide cannot make us happy. We have a 35% increase of municipal solid waste between 2015 and 2019. Right now we are producing 2.7 billion tons of municipal solid waste per year. And as you can see here, roughly 40% of it either is non-collected at all, or it goes to dump sites and open burning. So this is roughly 150 million tons more than it used to be in 2015. So what is the strange thing here? Also in the last 5 years, we have delivered a lot of new infrastructure. The increase of the waste quantities overcomes this delivery. And this is something that we will find it in front of us all the next years, creating a lot of serious environmental and health problems. The other thing that is important is to realize that since things are like that, the global community really failed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 12.4, which was that by 2020, we will achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste through their life cycle. Obviously, we are very, very far away from that. And not only that, but also between 2015 and 2019, we have 700 million tons of additional waste production. What's happening now is that the new infrastructure we delivered worldwide, it's only 243 million tons, which means we deliver globally infrastructure closely to 35% of the rise of municipal solid waste capacity. So our speed to deliver is 1/3 of the required one. And not only that, for sure, going like this, we can expect that by 2030, we will have more dump sites than today. Actually, what we expect and calculated in this context is that the peak of dump sites will be around 2018, and it's going to be a little bit more than 730 million tons of waste annually. So what's happening? What is happening is that the world is divided. Because if you see the data where the infrastructure was delivered, you will find out that there was no new infrastructure exactly to the places that need that more, to the poorest part of the world. Instead, a big part of the new infrastructure was focused on already rich and developed countries and China. So it seems like this. The ones that have waste management systems are making them better. The ones that don't have, they are just left behind. To put it in another way, it's very close to the usual discussion we have. The rich are becoming richer, and the relevant distance by poor is increasing. So this is a situation worldwide before COVID-19 comes. Now, COVID-19 did not come all of a sudden. It came in the middle of a huge transformation of the global landscape in waste management. As you can see here, we have 5 interconnected trends that really redefine the global landscape in waste management. I would rather say that they redefine both waste management practices, but also they redefine the very term waste. Let me explain why. First of all, we have Industry 4.0 that redefines our whole society. It redefines the way we are working, the way we are relating each other. It redefines what production and means of productions require. It redefines working relationships and policy aspects. For some people, this will redefine actually our own political systems, as it already happens. Then we have circular economy. Circular economy is a huge policy shift that brings waste management much closer and much more interconnected and integrated in resource management. And this requires very serious changes, not only in policies, but also in supply chains, something for which the big industry seems not to be prepared. Then we have marine litter. Marine litter redefines the way we face plastics. With a plethora of millions of pictures showing the problems in oceanic flora and fauna by marine litter, the whole world is now thinking seriously about the importance of plastic pollution in our oceans. I would say this is becoming a planetary challenge similar to climate change. And it obliges us to rethink how much are we dependent on plastics and how we can reduce this dependence. At the same time, besides those 3 trends, we have what I call the end of dirty recycling, which is actually the result of the change of Chinese policies in accepting dirty recyclables. And of course, all this is happening during the period in which global warming makes very clearly its effects worldwide and redefines the way projects are financed and measured. Now, someone might think that the relationship between these 5 trends are not that obvious. Well, allow me to say that they are much more obvious and strong than we think. Let me give you an example. If we want to avoid global warming, we need to deploy photovoltaics and wind energy systems. We need to deploy new innovative batteries. We need to have better energy efficiency. We need to develop electric cars. All these developments, according to the latest World Bank report, require like 3 billion tons of metals, like cobalt, chromium, nickel, and of course steel. Now, these 3 billion tons of metals is impossible to be available by 2050 if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement targets, unless 1/3 or 40% of them comes through circular loops. So let me put it that way. Developing a circular economy for this specific supply chain of metals is a condition to fight climate change. And without it, even if we excavate the whole planet, we will not be able to deliver the Paris Agreement targets and restrict the impacts of global warming. Even worse, Industry 4.0 would not be possible without circular economy in these metals. So this is a measure of how interconnected are all these different challenges of our world. And this is why I'm saying that even without COVID-19, we are heading rapidly towards the end of business as usual. And COVID-19 just puts the last drop on the already full glass of water, making business as usual much more difficult than we thought. What is strange with COVID-19 is that it makes its huge impact not only to the usual suspects like Africa and Southeastern Asia and poor Latin American countries. COVID-19 delivers tremendous impacts in Europe, USA, and Australia, and Japan. It delivers a message of not good response and unpreparedness to the most rich countries of the world. And you have to say the truth. the most developed and rich countries of the world were caught unprepared for such a pandemic. Because for the last 15 years, or 50 years, even better, pandemics was something not as a concern for rich countries. It was something for poor countries only. And the previous pandemics were easily restricted to poor countries only. But now, due to the globalization effects, pandemics are in the heart of the most rich countries of the world. And no one can get rid of them alone without changing the way we live. Let me build a little bit on that. In this table, you can see in the left table some basic characteristics that I believe COVID-19 has. So COVID-19 is a strong signal of the end of business as usual. It says that, listen guys, no matter how rich you are, no matter how good infrastructure you have, nature is always stronger than you. And the unexpected might become usual in 1 year or some months. And this will create huge impacts. COVID-19 says the global ecosystem, the human ecosystem worldwide is much more fragile and vulnerable than we think. This is also very true for solid waste crisis. We know very well that if we are vulnerable to COVID-19, we would also be vulnerable to, I don't know how many thousands or million new viruses that are prepared in the world's dump sites that receive 40% of the world's waste. And since there are millions of people living around it, we cannot feel safe just because you don't have a dump site not nearby to us if you are in Europe or in USA. COVID-19 shows clearly that health protection is a global challenge. In an interconnected and globalized world, travelers can transmit these diseases in hours from one part of the world to the other. So to protect global health, you need global cooperation. And what we see now is not exactly global cooperation. It's not global cooperation when rich countries steal masks from poorer ones. It's not a good global cooperation when the richest country of the world gets out of the World Health Organization. It's not global cooperation when we have more than 200 efforts worldwide to achieve the new vaccination for COVID without any coordination, and just leave it to market conditions, who's going to do it first, where he's going to sell it, and in what price. And it's exactly the same with solid waste crisis worldwide. It's a global health challenge, but it's not becoming obvious as COVID because the dead bodies from the solid waste crisis are never on camera. They never go to hospitals. They never call the ambulance because most of them are either dead because of kind of epidemics, which are local, or they don't have even a face and an ID. They are poor informal recyclers living around the dump sites. They are poor villagers drinking lead poison water from battery management. COVID-19 makes obvious that what we really need to overcome these global challenges is scientists, experts, and very well documented data-driven decisions. This is exactly also what we need for the solid waste management crisis. We are really scared and tired from so many people that pretend to be experts just because they have read 1 or 2 articles in magazines, and they want their opinion to be delivered exactly in the same validity with someone who is studying waste management for 40 years. COVID-19 proved that we were not ready for a pandemic, although there were a lot of scientists that for many, many years were really shouting loudly about it. The same is happening with solid waste crisis. There are a lot of scientists, and I put myself in this part also, that we are crying for the last 10, 15 years, we are heading towards a big crisis. Who is listening? And even from those who is listening, who is doing something much more than the business as usual. And finally, COVID-19 puts a big question. How we will go out of this crisis? Are we going to be more fragmented or more unified? Are we going to have a better and well-coordinated global response? Or are we going to have 3 or 4 different parts of the world behaving in different dimensions? Well, the same is true also about the solid waste crisis. Now, having said that, I need to drill down a little bit. So let me be very clear. Pandemics are urban. And what is proven during the COVID-19 pandemics is that municipal solid waste management is a major urban service that protects public health and environment. So it's a major contribution to our daily living standards. Imagine how difficult will be our life if besides the pandemics, we had also a waste crisis in our city. And as you recognize the importance of a good health system only when we miss it, the same exactly is true for waste management too. We realize how important is waste management for our daily lives only when we miss it. Waste management is an essential service that should be continuously delivered 24 hours per day, every week of the year. And this is true during the pandemics too. And the good thing is that governments and local authorities are starting to recognize this and put proper measures in place. And I think a very good example is what the UK government did to recognize the essential role of waste management during the pandemics and deliver a proper scheme to keep them on board each and every day. The thing is that during the pandemics, municipal solid waste management has to shift its priorities. It cannot be the same as it was before. And one key element on that is about final sinks. So working with ISVA, we delivered 4 broad priorities for waste management during the pandemics. First, authorities should ensure that waste management, recycling services, treatment and disposal facilities will not be disrupted and no extra risks for public health will be created by improper or inadequate waste management. Second, we have to protect people. We have to protect waste management workers, both formal and informal. And we should give them the opportunity to take additional precautions and ensure health and safety procedures to be protected by any potential infection by the waste streams and or the equipment. Third, we should readjust recycling activities to make sure that we will avoid cross-contamination and infection. And finally, we know worldwide that we have increased quantities of healthcare and medical waste that should be safely treated and disposed of, making sure that they pose no risk for further infection and pollution. And this means we definitely require a safe final sink for them. Now, at the same time, we also realize that COVID-19 is the perfect storm for recycling, especially for plastics. Due to the online, on the e-commerce sales, the increase on e-commerce and online food sales, we have much more packaging waste, much more plastic waste. At the same time, we realize that people are afraid to recycle bottles and they put it easier in the normal bag. At the same time, in USA, some states ban reusable bags and Starbucks stopped filling reusable cups. So this makes a new tsunami of plastic waste, including masks, gloves, and personal protective equipment, that is very difficult or impossible to be recycled, and single-use plastic in some cases are striking back. We have to say clearly that we should not allow the pandemic to act as a whole that will allow single-use plastics to come back. And this is a matter of global coordination and legislative measures. Now, there are 2 very important things that we should consider. And this is that during the pandemics, the most vulnerable part of the population are waste pickers. WEGO has done a great job on how waste pickers can be protected during the pandemics. And I urge you to have a look at this and spread it around the world, because waste pickers during the pandemics should continue to deliver their recycling services, not only to continue recycling, but mainly because this is their income. This is how they live. I'd like to finish saying that with the support and the changes of the COVID-19, we are heading towards a new paradigm in solid waste management. And this new paradigm is also a big part of my new book, Industry 4.0 and Circular Economy. 4 elements are constructing this new paradigm. First, waste management goes beyond waste. It has to be applied and expanded to all supply chains. Second, we need to rethink the role of recycling in the circular economy. Third, we need to redefine the importance of final sinks. And fourth, we need to utilize the huge opportunities and challenges of digitalization and Industry 4.0. To put it in another way, what you can see in this graph is the size of different industrial sectors according to their contribution to the gross domestic product. So you can see that the biggest industrial sector, of course, is manufacturing. The second one is wholesale and retail trade, and the third, energy. And this small gear here is waste management. Well, if you want me to say what is circular economy in a nutshell, is to use this small gear to rearrange the relationships between all of them, to use solid waste management as a catalyst that will stimulate change in the whole economic system. If we will not do it, very soon we will have to face the very important and very difficult future waste streams. We expect around 100 million tons of waste by 2030, and right now we manage in a proper way just 25% of them. We expect more than 80 million tons of photovoltaics by 2050, 100 million tons of apparel and footwear waste by 2030. We expect 182 million units of wearables per year in 2025. Our systems are completely unprepared to manage these types of waste. And the environmental and health impacts from their mismanagement will be very, very serious, certainly much more serious than we consider now. So let's not allow our unpreparedness to become a permanent vulnerability. Let's try to build and prepare the system from now, building the important final things we require, reminding everyone that the primary scope of waste management is to protect human health and environment, trying to deliver our services each hour of the day, each day of the week, each week of the year, and rearranging our values. You know, a few years ago, if you ask a lot of people around 20 years old, all of them, they wanted to become stock exchange dealers. Now we know very well that our economies, our societies can survive without bankers. They can survive without celebrities. They can survive even without cosmetics and a big part of the industry closed. But our societies cannot survive without doctors and waste management. And I think this is a very strong point that we have to deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonis. That was very inspiring. I think you gave us many insights to think about. I would like now to hand over to Verena and to Emmanuel for their presentation.
Yes, thank you, Francesca. So I will tell a little, coming down from Antonis' very impressive presentation, which is giving the big global picture of solid waste. We will come now to have a look into onto the very local level. So we're going from the very big picture to the very local level. And I will, myself and Emmanuel, we will talk a little bit about solid waste management and how we dealt with it in our city-to-city partnership between Bonn in Germany and Cape Coast in Ghana, and you will probably see some of the aspects that Antonis mentioned before, how this concerns the local level. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can go to the next one because I think we are a bit running on time. I will start with talking about municipal project partnerships in general. That's a concept that the city of Bonn is pursuing very strongly in their partnerships. It's dealing with promoting the collaboration between cities, but within the city partnerships, we address concrete topics relevant for municipalities. That's why we call it project partnerships. And these topics that are relevant for municipalities are all topics that refer to the daily business of municipalities. For instance, the provision of municipal services like water, waste collection, urban roads, climate mitigation and adaptation, stuff like that. So that allows that you really can tailor the partnership to the individual interests of the two cities and the priorities and the expertise of the two individual cities. It often includes expert exchange as a starting point and then goes over to implement concrete joint projects. Next slide, please. If we look into the partnership between Bonn and Cape Coast, it started in 2008 when the City Council of Bonn took a decision that Bonn should engage further into partnerships with an African city. At the same time, a civil society organization, a partnership association was founded, which included engaged citizens from Bonn, but also Ghanaians living in Bonn. And they accompanied or supported the partnership right from the start. They were also very helpful in identifying a partner city in Ghana. And then there were various exchange visits between Bonn and Cape Coast. And we also have to see that nearly at the same time, the federal state, the regional level in Germany, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia started a partnership with Ghana as a whole, which gives us a sort of an umbrella to the whole city-to-city partnership. Next slide, please. So in 2012, there was an official partnership agreement signed. You see the two mayors in the picture, the two mayors at the time who signed that in 2012. And this agreement put a concrete focus on the promotion, particularly of sustainable development with the core topics, environment, climate mitigation and adaptation, renewable energies, biodiversity and waste management. And from there on, we started to be one of the, Bonn and Cape Coast were two of the first municipalities that participated in a then newly set up program by Engagement Global, which is funded by the German Development Corporation, 50 municipal climate partnerships in 2011. Next slide, please. And this partnership I mentioned is accompanied or supported also by various stakeholders. It's not only the two municipalities. I mentioned the partnership already. There's also a partnership between the two universities, Bonn Rhein-Sieg and the University of Cape Coast. There are also other NGOs involved, like Anno Modular Aid, which is an NGO active in the health sector. There's the German African Center in Bonn, which consists of engaged citizens that did various exchange visits between the two cities. There are numerous research institutions with a focus on Ghana and Germany. And there is, as I mentioned, the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Next slide, please. And here I would hand over to Emmanuel to describe the situation of the stakeholders in Cape Coast.
Thank you very much. This partnership between Bonn and Cape Coast doesn't limit us to only Bonn and Cape Coast, but also involves other stakeholders. For example, the Ghana Heritage Conservation Trust, the University of Cape Coast, as Verena mentioned earlier on, then Ogua Traditional Council. The Traditional Council here in Ghana, the lands are owned by the chiefs and then families. So for any development to take place, you need to identify the various stakeholders. And in this case, the Ogua Traditional Council is very key in this partnership. And then we also have Sudu Garages Association. Pseudo Garages Association, because one of the projects we undertook was called Restoration of Fosu Lagoon. And we realized that these garages associations were operating along the borders of the lagoon. So there was a need for us to bring them on board and then to educate them about the impact of their activities on the lagoon. Then, of course, the Cape Coast Metropolitan Assembly as the local government authority. And then another important stakeholder and collaborator was the Green Africa Youth Organization, which has just come on board. In fact, this NGO, this is a local NGO, and they are able to use plastic waste to generate products and or what they call, or what we all know as circular economy. So we are currently also partnering with them to know that waste management is not one person's job, but it is for all of us to put our shoulders on the wheel. So these are the various stakeholders that are involved in this partnership so far. And Verena will do the next slide, and then I will continue.
Yeah, so now let's have a closer look at the solid waste management in the two cities. How is the situation in Bonn? In Bonn, we have a quantity of 68,000 tons per year of solid waste collected. That is augmented or complemented by additional 95.3 tons per year. And if you can see, this latter is the part that is going into recycling. That's, for instance, paper, plastics, glass, metals, etc. So the recycling quota in Bonn is 58.2% of these directly recycled materials, and the remaining solid waste is treated in a waste incineration plant and converted into thermal energy, which in Germany is classified as a renewable energy. So basically for the statistics, we have a recycling quota or a reusing quota of 100%. However, there are of course challenges. We heard it in Antoni's presentation as well. E-waste, which creates a lot of critical raw materials. Our municipal waste collection enterprise is doing big efforts, great efforts to look into how this can be recycled. The other thing is, I think that's all over the world. Antonis mentioned marine waste, which is mainly coming from plastic. In Bonn, we have we assume that it's nearly 40,000 plastic cups being used every day. So what the municipal waste collection enterprise is promoting is to make more use of reusable cups and reusable water bottles and so on. And now we look at the situation in Cape Coast in the next slide, please.
Thank you very much. And for Cape Coast, as you can see, the solid waste generated, that's about 253 tons per day. And this information was collected in 2018. And we are able to collect 80% of this waste that is generated within the metropolis, and which means that 20% we are not able to collect. And then when it comes to recycling of the waste, let me say that Cape Coast, as we speak right now, hasn't got any structured or formal recycling facility for our solid waste. What we can see are the community waste pickers who focus and concentrate mostly on plastic products, and then they collect it, and then they are able to sell it to some other people who collect it and send it to other recycling facilities which are outside Cape Coast. And then some of the challenges we have here as far as waste management is concerned is about inadequate equipment, such as compacting trucks, which will help us to convey our waste to the final disposal site. And let me also add quickly here that Cape Coast at the moment doesn't have any engineered landfill site. So what you have at the moment is a tract of land where we collect our waste and then we go and dump it there. Once in a while, we go and compact it. But the question is, for how long can we continue with this? And what is the impact of how we are dumping waste on the large tracts of land that we are able to collect? Of course, you and I know that land is an infinite resource. So if we continue like this, it will come to a point where we'll not even have any place to dump our waste. And then one of our challenges, as mentioned earlier on, are the plastic waste. The plastic, when you take the waste composition of maybe a bin, a liter bin, you realize about 70% are plastics. And the question is, to what extent or how can we turn these plastics into other reusable products so that the issue of plastic will not be a problem for us again. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, we don't have any engineered landfill site. But in trying to mention the Green Africa Youth Organization, they are using community waste pickers to collect plastic waste and then clean them. And then once the plastic waste are collected and cleaned, they are sent to a central point where they weigh this plastic waste, and then the community pickers are paid some amount of money depending on the volume and then the weight of the plastic that they collected. So this is sent to the Cyclos Elmina, where the plastic waste products are turned into rubber pellets in quotes, and then they're also transported elsewhere to another facility for probably reuse. So we think that if we're able to support this initiative, at least it will solve the problem of our plastic waste menace, whilst we can concentrate on others such as the e-waste, and which we are still grappling with. Next slide, please.
And I will give you a brief outlook on what we have been doing so far in this partnership. I mentioned the program of the municipal climate partnerships already, which we joined. There we developed a quite large, extensive joint action program, and waste management was one of the 3 priority areas that we identified. We developed guidelines for it and also developed potential measures which we could, if we received funding and had the capacities, then implement. Next slide, please. And with the funding from Engagement Global via the BMZ, we received as one of the first German municipalities funding from the climate facility funding to implement a project, restoration of the fossil lagoon, a 4-year project that ran between 2012 and 2015, and was actually the starting point of doing joint projects between Bonn and Cape Coast. And in this 4-year period, we realized that basically for the restoration, the initial focus was a lot more on biodiversity and the restoration of the fossil lagoon. We realized that we had to give a lot more attention to waste management. So we had to realign some of the measures that were initially planned. Some of the measures done in the project with reference to waste management were the construction of waste traps that feed the rivers into the lagoon that keep out the solid waste from the lagoon. The installation of central waste containers around several sites at the lagoon, the clearing of wild dump sites, and information and sensitization campaigns for the population around the lagoon. Next slide, please. That was supplemented with other measures from other stakeholders. So for instance, the Partnership Association and local CSOs in Cape Coast organized a climate week in the schools surrounding the lagoon. They also arranged a teacher training on environmental topics to have environment being introduced into the curriculum of those schools. We also had an exchange of volunteers where 2 volunteers from Bonn worked along with the 3 volunteers at the Biodiversity Center, developed a lot of training material addressing issues like plastic waste and recycling. And We run another second environmental education program there that was funded by the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And we also had the chance to, that Cape Coast could participate in a GIZ expert exchange program on plastic recycling in 2018. Next slide, please. And I give this over to Emmanuel, who will tell now more about the partnership in the context of the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge. Emmanuel?
Sorry, I did not unmute my. So I was just saying that the two cities have got good knowledge of the situation in the partnership cooperation. And then the two cities are also aware of the differences and then are interested. The differences, for example, Bonn is far ahead of Cape Coast in terms of waste management, and we also know that as a change maker city, we need to learn from the good practices of Bonn so that together we can at least move the waste management agenda forward in the two cities. And then we've also had 12 years of experience in joint corporations, and then also a good network of additional stakeholders enabling funding situation and all that. Next slide, please. Yeah, work in a more thorough way with solid foundation, and then also to involve accessible and adequate technical expertise from Waste-Wise Cities Challenge, and then also be involved in the network of like-minded cities, especially those that have made progress in waste management for Cape Coast for us to learn from. And then I'm sure probably there might also be some good lessons or maybe some experience for other cities to also learn from us. Yes, and it is this good partnership between Bonn and Cape Coast that gave us the opportunity to apply for the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge application, which was opened some time ago. And we were fortunate, the two cities are fortunate to have been selected to take part in the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge. And then the photos you see on the extreme right are just the photos during the online signing ceremony of the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge MOU between the city of Bonn, the city of Cape Coast, and then the Waste-Wise Cities Challenge. Next slide, please. Yes, as a part of a city which is implementing the Waste-Wise Cities project, we were expected to participate in the World Cleanup Day, which fell on the 19th of September 2020. And some of the collaborators that came on board, or let me use the word volunteers that came on board, were the Play Soccer Ghana, the Green Africa Youth Organization, and then the Clean Beach along the Bond Street. But the Play Soccer Ghana, I'm sure somebody will be asking, what is playing soccer got to do with waste management? This is a local NGO that has designed an innovative way of using the plastic rubber sachet in weaving the goalpost net. But one of our activities for the cleanup day was for us to have engaged in the fun game for which we were going to use the product of the goalpost net. But unfortunately, at that time, the country was under restrictions, and then the contact sports were not allowed to take place. So we couldn't do that aspect of it. So these were some of the organizations and then the volunteers that came. And then the pictures you just see are some of the pictures during the cleanup exercise. The picture down here, this one was when the volunteers were gathering. And then this was a banner that we did for the cleanup exercise. We had two teams, of course, the global team, which was Let's Do It Well, and then the local team, which was a Clean Cape Coast, and that was what we did. So the two pictures here you see just below the compactor track, you see the one on my extreme left was the situation before the cleanup, and then the one on the extreme right opposite it is the situation just when we are about wrapping up the cleanup. So which tells that with the right policies, with the right infrastructure, at least we'll be able to reduce the menace of plastic waste in our city. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that brings us to our joint presentation, and I want to thank all of you for your attention, and then we are ready to learn from your experience and also ready to answer questions to the best of our ability. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you from my side.
Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. I'm sorry we are running late, so I don't think we will have time for the Q&A session, unfortunately. In case if you have any questions that you would like to address, you could write to our wastewisecities@un.org email address. And I also invite everyone to visit our Wastewise Cities website page on the UN Habitat website and to learn more about what we are doing for waste management. And once again, thank you very much for joining this event. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.